This story has been told over and over to billions of people for 2,000 years. And it will continue to be told long after you and I are gone. Scholars and preachers, mystics, monastics have all spent thousands of years debating what this story means. Every year on Palm Sunday, we hear the crucifixion story from Mark or Matthew or Luke. And every year on Good Friday, we hear the crucifixion story from John. And so it has been for many years. And yet, every time I hear this story, I notice something different. This year, we spent 4 of the last 6 Sunday mornings hearing long readings from the Gospel of John. We heard the story of Nicodemus, who had a conversation with Christ under the cover of darkness because he was too scared to be seen in public with Jesus. We met the woman at the well, a Samaritan woman who had been shunned and shamed by her community, and yet who Jesus had this deep theological conversation with. Next, we encountered the man born blind. Jesus healed him on the Sabbath, caused a great kerfuffle, and this man who had been born blind, suddenly his life was harder, even though he had been given his sight. So Jesus came and found him after that to reconnect. And I like to think, welcoming him in to the disciples. And lastly, we read the story of the resurrection of Lazarus, a great foreshadowing of what is to come. Spending all these weeks studying these stories from John meant that when the time came for me to study John's crucifixion story again this year, I noticed a character who could very easily go unnoticed. He is only mentioned once, right there at the end, but he is familiar to us. Nicodemus. Nicodemus, the one who had first come to Jesus at night, was there too. He brought a mixture of myrrh and aloe, nearly 75 pounds in all. Nicodemus, the one who had been too scared to be seen in Jesus' company, the poor, confused, literally thinking Nicodemus, who didn't understand how he could possibly go back into his mother's womb and be born again. Nicodemus was there, along with Joseph of Arimathea, to tend Jesus' body and get it ready for burial. Interestingly enough, Joseph of Arimathea is mentioned in all 4 gospel accounts in this exact context, providing a tomb to bury Jesus' body. But only the Gospel of John puts Nicodemus also at this story. And Nicodemus doesn't just show up to help. He also brings enough myrrh and aloe to give Jesus an extravagant, one might say kingly, burial. And unlike before, when he came to speak to Christ under the cover of darkness, this time Nicodemus shows his allegiance in public, risking retaliation from Pilate and the chief priests alike. He goes from being ashamed and sneaking in under the cover of darkness to caring publicly for Jesus' body under the light of day. And he gave with radical generosity, with expensive oils and spices, aloe and myrrh. You may recognize myrrh because it brings us full circle. Myrrh was one of the 3 gifts given to the baby Jesus by the Magi from the east: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And here in this story with Nicodemus, we see what the purpose of myrrh was. Specifically, this fragrant oil was used to anoint corpses before they were buried. From Jesus' life was on a path to this ending, to be executed like a criminal, but buried like a king. And to give Jesus this last act of public devotion was not without risk for Nicodemus. He was a Pharisee and a member of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council made up of teachers of the law and judges. So to align himself publicly with Jesus after Jesus had been executed meant he was risking his own reputation, his safety, his life. After all, many of Jesus' disciples died martyrs' deaths. And still, Nicodemus did this final thing. He showed up. He was there when it counted. Jesus was dead, but it wasn't too late for Nicodemus. His faith and his actions in the light will be remembered forever. Every year, we come to this day, Good Friday, and we wonder what it means. We wonder what could possibly be good about this day. Well, as Christians, we believe that something miraculous and world-changing occurred over these 3 days. We find all of our hope and joy in the resurrection of Easter. But before we experience that joy, every year we return to this day to re-experience the horror and the pain and the suffering that came before Jesus' death. And every year, as we walk the steps of Christ on these days, we wonder what it all means. And turns out Nicodemus is the one who has the answer, because Jesus told Nicodemus what it all meant in that conversation they had under the cover of darkness. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, so that whoever believes in him will never truly die, but have everlasting life. God did not send his Son to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. It sounds simple, but we know it isn't. There is a whole area of Christian theological study called soteriology, devoted to the study of salvation, atonement theory, and trying to parse out what exactly happens during Jesus' resurrection and death that saves humanity, and what exactly humanity is being saved from. And as could be typical for a priest, I do love studying those things. I could go down that rabbit hole for hours. But I know realistically I won't understand everything about what it means until I get to ask some questions on the other side of this life. Hearing this story, it's easy to get lost in the pain and the blood and the suffering and the violence of the story. And when that trauma overwhelms us, it is very tempting to go into our heads and intellectualize the whole thing. But for tonight, I think the lesson for us to learn is much simpler. And it is a lesson in feeling, not a lesson in knowing. Jesus taught and healed and suffered and died because of his deep love. Love for his friends, for his disciples, love for his mother, his neighbors, and his enemies alike. His love for you and for me. For God so loved the world. And it is never too late for us to show up. It's never too late, as Nicodemus shows us. Never too late to come into the light. It's never too late to decide to follow him. It is normal to have questions. It's normal to wonder what it all means. At least I sure hope it is. It is Good Friday, after all. It's normal to feel sad or overwhelmed tonight. But it's never too late to be brave. It's never too late to come into the light. It's never too late to try something new. It's never too late to do the hard thing. It's never too late to accept the gift of God's love, and never too late to give that love back to the world in return. Today is always the best day to begin. And this day is the most solemn day in the Christian calendar, a day of mourning, of remembering suffering and death, a day when we may feel especially sad or grieved by our sins and mistakes. But like Jesus did, even as he endured this unimaginable suffering and death, like him, we know how the story will end. And so we know the truth of Good Friday. It is never, ever too late.